Although the VIP area was bustling with activity, Kirk Frost and young Jock weren't behaving like their typical flamboyant, exuberant selves. Both were dressed to kill and were positioned in their corner booth, looking out over the crowd like royalty. However, they weren't joking around or enjoying their drinks like the other VIPs. Although they were holding glasses, neither of them was actually drinking. They were often moving and looking around the dance floor. Kirk merely nodded slightly as Jock leaned in to mutter something, his attention never faltering. Although they appeared cool and collected to most clubgoers, their body language conveyed a different tale. The rest of the room was a flurry of activity, with people dancing, shouting, and taking photos. But Kirk and Jock weren't there to celebrate. Instead, they were making use of their booth, which provided them with the ideal vantage point. They appeared to be lying in wait. Then he showed up. People immediately flocked around Lil Scrappy, who came with the same swagger he always had, beaming broadly and beaming with enthusiasm, lighting up the room as only he could. He had no idea that conflict was on the way. Cheers, daps, hugs. He was doing what he did best, taking selfies while giggling and clinking drinks. The crowd was captivated by Scrappy's charisma when he was on 10. The whole vibe changed the instant he intervened. That's precisely what occurs when Scrappy appears. He turns into the focal point. However, a few keen eyes noticed something else while the majority were lured to the fun. Kirk and Jock were still staring at Scrappy's every move across the floor in the darkness of that poorly lit VIP area. To the typical partygoer, everything appeared to be okay. However, for those who were listening, the tension was beginning to rise when a dancer beside the bar abruptly slowed and turned to face Scrappy's gang. Two security personnel discreetly moved. Even the DJ paused in the middle of the transition, lowering the tempo a little as if he sensed something changed. Due to the fact that every flashlight creates a shadow, Scrappy was directly into his. Once in the booth, the atmosphere cooled off. Jock nodded, checked his phone, and then slowly glanced back out across the crowd as Kirk leaned in once more, this time speaking in a low, serious tone. There were no jokes or smiles, just a heavy, somber gaze directed at Scrappy. Jock nodded slightly in Scrappy's direction. Kirk narrowed his eyes as he followed it. They didn't blink. A waitress brought them another round, but the energy made her feel uneasy. She put the bottle down carefully, remained silent, and left with slightly shaking hands. She could sense it too. The phones with cameras had not yet been released. People around the booth began to notice how still Kirk and Jock had become, like watchful observers waiting for the proper moment. But the genuine ones in the room sensed something was building. In the meantime, Scrappy continued to be seen making jokes with his crew. Scrappy paused, glanced over his shoulder, and kept his eyes fixed on Kirk and Jock long enough for everyone to see the change when one of his boys leaned in and whispered something in his ear. The wait was now over, and they were no longer merely observing. They were prepared. It was not long before the quiet broke. When Kirk and young Jock eventually left their VIP position, they started to move through the crowd. The atmosphere immediately changed around them. Shouting hadn't started yet, but their deliberate, purposeful movements made individuals take notice. Discussions paused. The throng dispersed without anyone asking. Scrappy was still in his element, joking and having a good time with his group near the middle of the dance floor. But he sensed the movement and saw them approaching. "What's up?" He'd inquired in a cool but cautious tone as they approached, turning to face each other with his arms slightly out in an attempt to maintain neutrality. The voice lacked any warmth, but neither Jock nor Kirk entered grinning, perhaps out of curiosity or a little caution. No love, no dap. They pressed themselves close to one another until they were too close to be comfortable. The music continued to blare, but it seemed to be at odds with the intense energy that pulsed between them. Next came the change. Sharpness replaced subtlety in the tension. First, Jock leaned in and spoke in a low but cutting tone. "We heard that you have been speaking a bit too carelessly lately, Scrap." And he maintained eye contact. Clearly taken by surprise, Scrappy's face transformed, with eyebrows drawn in. Realizing that he was perplexed by what he had asked, or at least seeming to be, Kirk didn't wait for clarifications and got right to the point. "Exactly what we mean. Running your mouth while we're not around while playing both sides and smiling in our faces." Kirk then produced his phone and brought it up as proof in court, with the screen lighting up and receipts ready. The moment's actual weight began to lessen at that point. "You don't think this will be returned to us? We obtained the receipts." Jock plunged in once more. "They sent us everything, and you were in that studio last week talking out of line. Do you think people are loyal to you?" After glancing at the phone, Scrappy turned back to Kirk. "That's not the entire conversation. You all misinterpret things. I said what I said, but that wasn't the way you were trying to twist it," he added, raising his voice a little, but Kirk refused to back down. "Whether you use context or not, you said it, period." The tension changed now that the so-called proof was in place. It was now personal and not simply words. Every second the atmosphere grew thicker, and Scrappy's face reddened. His normally calm demeanor wavered. He shouted, "Y'all are acting like I'm some backstabber. But I have been real with both of you more times than I can count. Apparently, I'm afraid of receipts. Anyway, half of you are fake, and there is no longer any loyalty in this place." The louder volume made everything change. Those who had been ignoring it were suddenly listening. The recording on the phone began. As the DJ sensed the change, the music was turned down a bit. The dance floor's edge security started to scuttle closer to maintain vigilance. With a finger, Scrappy poked Kirk's phone. "When I wasn't around, you wanted to show the others that you were talking slickly about me." The comments hit home like a punch. When Jock moved forward out of impulse, Kirk grabbed him firmly and remarked, but Scrappy showed no signs of cooling off. They were surrounded by the mob, not too near, but certainly close. Everyone in the club could see that. Under the throbbing lights, trust, pride, and respect were at stake. It was nothing more than words now. There was a lot of anxiety in the air. That last spark that would ignite it all was just a few moments away. Despite the lively atmosphere in the VIP area, Kirk Frost and young Jock weren't behaving like their typical flamboyant, exuberant selves. Despite being dressed to kill and positioned at their corner booth like royalty, they were not chatting with the crowd, making jokes, or leisurely sipping their drinks like the other VIPs. Despite holding glasses, neither of them was actually drinking. They were always moving, their eyes continually scoring the dance floor. Kirk gave a little nod, his attention never straying as Jock leaned down to mutter something. They appeared cool, collected, and tranquil to the majority of club patrons, but their body language conveyed a different message. The energy level in the rest of the room was insane. While others were dancing, yelling, and taking photographs, Kirk and Jock weren't present to commemorate. They felt as if they were lying in wait because they were using their booth, which provided them with the ideal vantage point. He then showed up, unaware that conflict was on the horizon. Lil Scrappy walked in with his usual presence. His energy-filled smile lit up the room like only he could, and everybody rushed to him at once. Daps, cheers, and hugs. His element was in him, loudly laughing while posing for pictures with clinking glasses. Scrappy was on 10, and his vibe was absorbed by the audience. When he stepped in, the whole atmosphere changed. The moment Scrappy arrives, that is precisely what occurs. He turns into the focal point of attention. While the majority were captivated by the enjoyment, a few keen eyes noticed something else. In the dimly illuminated VIP section across the room, Kirk and Jock remained still, confined. Everyone was watching Scrappy closely. The tension was beginning to crackle in the air. But to the typical partygoer, everything appeared to be normal. Abruptly, a dancer by the bar slowed, looking at Scrappy's group. Two security officers moved discreetly. Even the DJ paused in the middle of the transition, lowering his beat a little as if he sensed a change, since every spotlight creates a shadow, and Scrappy was entering his. It became chilly back at the booth. Kirk spoke in a sharp, low voice as he leaned in once more. Jock looked at his phone and nodded before gently scanning the room again. No jokes, no smiles, just a weighted, silent gaze at Scrappy. Scrappy received a little hint from Jock. Kirk's eyes narrowed as he followed, refused to blink. A waitress brought another round, but she was unable to handle the excitement. She could feel it too, so she put the bottle down softly, said nothing, and left with her hands shaking slightly. The genuine people in the room understood something was going on, even if the camera phones hadn't yet been released. Kirk and Jock had gone motionless, like observers waiting for the ideal opportunity, and people around the booth began to notice this. As all of this was going on, Scrappy was still having fun with his crew when one of his boys leaned in and whispered something in his ear. Scrappy stopped, glanced over his shoulder, and briefly fixed his gaze on Kirk and Jock so that everyone could feel the change. Now that the wait was finally over, they weren't merely observing, they were prepared.
Man, I am frustrated, irritated, man.